Well, now, personally, I have three emergency funds. You remember there's a video I made and I told you you should have an emergency fund. And before I tell you why I have three emergency funds, first of all, what is it in the first place? Emergency fund is the money set aside for the purposes of utilizing it in case of a need arises without you predetermining it. Emergency, see, you cannot plan for an emergency. Are we together? Do not confuse emergency fund with a sinking fund. Emergency fund, you set it aside not knowing that an emergency or a something or a need will actually occur. Are we together? But when you set aside a sinking fund, you already anticipate that a need will arise. For example, let's say let's say you're pregnant. You already know after the 9 months you'll actually give birth. Then of course money will be needed for diapers, for whatever the thing it will be needed. So you already know that you need money at that particular point. So for me, I have three emergency funds. And I'm not saying that everyone should have a three emergency funds, but for me, I find it appropriate. And perhaps you can borrow a leaf out of my own experience because I love sharing real things. And maybe I do believe that they can be of help to you. Now, let's get into the business. Now, what you're supposed to understand when it comes to an emergency fund is that do not get into the world of investment without you having what we call emergency fund. Emergency fund is such a necessity because let's say something went wrong with your investment. Therefore, you can always find what we call you can always find what we call sort of a leap or sort of a soft landing and something of sort. Okay, so what you're supposed to do when it comes to such kind of a scenario, it is to have an emergency fund. And the first emergency fund that I have is what we call the normal emergency fund. This is the normal emergency fund. What do I mean by normal emergency fund? This is the emergency fund you set aside for the purposes of catering your bills, your food, your transport, just a normal human being. You see, there are things we call them the recurrent expenditure. There are things that actually sustain you. Sorry, guys, I do have a little cold, okay? Now, what happens is that whenever you set aside the money meant for emergency fund, this one caters for the recurrent expenditures. This is your rent if you're paying any, or your mortgage if you're having any, fueling your car if you have any, or transport. This is for school fees. This is for eating. This is for dressing and all those kind of things. That is the money that you set aside, and it's the most basics of the basics. So that is the first emergency fund I have, and that is caters for basics of the basics. So this one helps you. And I always tell people, let's say you want to get into the world of investment, do not get into it if you do not have this kind of an emergency fund. Why? Because what people do is that you find somebody has 200k. This is the only money that you have, and probably you do not have any business, or rather you do not have any existing cash flow that can be relied onto. And then you take the whole chunk and throw it into an emergency, or or maybe you go buy stocks, or you buy stocks, or you can call them shares. And then this one is a bit tricky because first of all, shares or stocks are what? They're high risk. They're high risk, or I love to use the term, they have high volatility. They have high volatility, and then you get the whole chunk into that. And then you do not even have, or even, let's talk about a very simple thing that you guys can understand, or we can understand. You take a whole chunk and go start yourself a business. When you start yourself a business, guess what? There's no way you can just start a business and the next month you start relying from the business and everything. No, you are supposed to give your business a breathability allowance for the business to establish itself before you start demanding from that particular business. Are we together? So therefore, as a result of this, it's always good to make sure that you set aside an emergency fund just to cater for your expenditure. Let's say your expenditure in a month is 20,000. So if you can take maybe, let's say, 3 months, you have yourself a 60k. You take a whole of 60k, put it somewhere for safety purposes. You remain with 140k. I'm using 200 as an example. Then 140k, you can get yourself into the business comfortably, knowing that the next month I have the money catered for my bills, the other month and the other month. By the time now you're doing that, the business have already given it an allowance for it to do what? For it to establish itself, for it to grow and such kind of a thing. And you can imagine this, you start a business this month and then the next month you are asking for 60,000, 20,000 from it. That's quite a huge chunk of cash. And then by the time now you're doing so in 3 months, you've taken 60,000 out of the business. And this is why you find some people, they start a business, and then after some time, they have actually eaten all the stocks and the business cannot even sustain itself, because indeed you're eating the business, where else you're supposed to eat the fruit of that particular business. So now that is the first emergency fund that I have. It's called the normal emergency fund, or that's how I call it anyway. You can give it whatever the term that you can give it to. All right. Now, the other emergency fund that I have, which is also essential, it's the emergency fund that is meant to do what? That is meant to purchase something, for money to be used, for money to be used. Money to be used simply means this is the emergency fund that I set aside for the sake of investing, for the sake of finding an opportunity out there. For example, let's say there's a time I gave you an example of my case. I'm this kind of a guy. Okay, I do understand that I have a little bit of high risk appetite. I love investing, and that's why I love saying that I love to be liquid. I love liquidity. And the type of a liquidity I would love, I don't love to put my money where it is fixated. I love to put my money where I can get it when an opportunity comes in. For me, I'm this kind of a guy who will go buy those goats whenever an opportunity rises and resell them. You know, I would go buy those cereals. I'm this kind of a guy who would grab that thing. Like, I'm this kind of a guy who is always, my tentacles are actually open out there, so that when I hear an opportunity, I can go grab it. Sometimes I can even buy some sort of, let me just say liquidity. I love being liquid. So the emergency fund I said is the money to be used. The money to be used, I treat it as an emergency. Why? Because an opportunity can arise. A deal can actually show up. And you know one thing, the moment a deal show up, do not wait. They don't speak the language of, hey, wait this deal for the next 3 months. No, this deal is either here. You get what I'm saying. It's a day or two, or sometimes even hours. The deal is off the table. So I love to have a money, and most of this cash I usually put it in a money market fund. I won't lie, I put this money in a money market fund. Why? Because this money from the MMF, I can actually pull it and get that. And if maybe let's say I'm in a money market fund which will require maybe let's say 3 days to withdraw or 2 days to withdraw, and yet this opportunity is needed like right now. Now this is where now the strategic people come in. I love to encircle myself with strategic people, someone who can just give them a call. Hey, you know what? I would love you to lend me 100,000, lend me 50,000, lend me 200,000. So you encircle yourself with those kind, because you already know. Hey, guess what? Not that I do not have, I do, but it's an MMF, and of course the process of crediting this money in my normal account, it's actually on course. But once I get that money, I give it back, that money, to whoever has actually lended me. Well, I understand it's quite difficult to get people who can just actually give you money anyhowly out there. But if you encircle yourself with appropriate and right people, strategic people, that's why I said I do not have friends. And for me, I find friends are a problem. The bigger the circle you have, the bigger the problems that you're gonna have in life. So it's always good to make sure that at least you encircle yourself with people who are actually, how can I say it? People who are, people who can solve different types of challenges and what have you. Anyway, now, see, money to be used, I treat it as an emergency, I put it out there. Now, the third emergency fund that I have, which is very, very essential, and I'm going to give a real example, is the B or C, rather. C, oh yeah, this should be a B. C is the money for emergency fund for what? For the business emergency fund. That is the money that's set aside for the purpose. For example, me producing these videos, this is a business. Why? Because putting videos on YouTube, it's a venture, it's a business, it's an investment. Okay? And of course, I receive calls, and if you would like to get a call, or rather would love to call me or text me for the purposes of investing, finances, and what have you, my number is always on the description of this specific video. So for me to be able to tell you that and you hear my voice, I need to invest in a microphone, I need to invest on this, I need to invest on, and I wonder why people never see this as a business. It's a business, it's a venture. For me to have this kind of a light I have right here, for me to have this kind of a studio I'm having right here, okay, it's an investment, it's a business. Even sometimes buying this nice and small and quite a shirt for me to make it's a business. So I love to have some. For example, right now as you speak, before I even start recording this video, I was checking on the gadget that I have here. I realized this microphone that I'm having right now, it is not compatible with that gadget. What does that mean? It means that I have to buy another microphone. Probably the next few days you'll see me with a different microphone. So what does that mean? It simply means that I need to have some cash somewhere. Sometimes some few weeks ago, this ring light that I'm using here, I don't know what I was doing. I don't know what happened. The next minute the ring light was down and it was broken or needed to be repaired. Although it was not a major, a major breakage, but at least it needed some repairs, of which I had to take it to a technical person to repair that particular thing for me. You see, these are businesses. It is good. You see, it is good to have your personal emergency fund. There is nothing wrong with it. That caters for your recurrent expenditures, caters for your things, the rent and what have you. It's also good to have can you imagine this? You have a business running and you have your own personal emergency. And this business cannot wait, really needs the business. Probably over 85% of people will be tempted to get the money from the normal emergency fund to actually salvage the business, because this is your ultimate thing. I mean, this is the thing that you run. Let's say if this is the business that feeds you, so you're likely to get the money from normal emergency. But if you can actually separate this emergency fund, you have your own emergency fund and you have the business emergency fund, and if the financial muscles allows you, you can have the money to be used emergency fund. Guess what happens now? An opportunity comes in, you don't contemplate on getting the money from the business, you don't contemplate on getting money from your normal emergency fund. The emergency fund, it's already there. So when you have this differentiation of this emergency fund, you know what money goes where. And that's why you find some people get an opportunity. They never take time. They never hesitate. They never, they never they're not this kind of guys that you find like they're thinking, hey, where should I invest? Or what should I do next? And all those kind of things. The money is already there. You just pump it there. And if you're becoming successful in that particular venture that you are in, it is always good to make sure that you have these kind of combination, so that at least you can have a soft movement as far as the investments are concerned. Now, that's me having those 3 emergency funds. Am I saying that everyone should have a 3 emergency fund? It could have been wiser, it could have been better. I would recommend, but again, it depends with your case scenario. Remember, whatever I say here, it is not that I'm an ultimate of ideas. It's not because I have the monopoly of all the ideas, but what I come to share here, it's simply my view. And of course, if you find something that you can borrow out of it, you know why I'm saying this? Some guys were telling me, hey, Joseph, you're telling us as if you have the manual for life. Oh, come on. Don't say that. See, I also learn from people, just like an iron sharpens another iron. So it is good if you can pick that what can work for you. Probably you are here and you think like, you know what, instead of 3, I can have 2. Instead of 3, I can, you know what, I'm just okay with 1. That's fantastic. Pick that what you need. But for God's sake, have an emergency fund. It's a necessity. You need to have it, okay? And do not have that money somewhere idle. Just have that cash somewhere where it is giving birth to small babies, called the passive income, and you're plowing it back time to time, so that at least that money is actually, money is an energy. I know sometimes I made a video and I told you guys, money is an energy. Money, how can I say this? Money is very spiritual. It's a very spiritual thing. And if it's a spiritual thing, then it means that you really need to get it understanding it in a spiritual perspective. What does that mean? Money is this energy. And remember what we were told back when you were in high school? Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but can do what? Can be transformed from one source or from one form to another. Money is actually, by the way, I don't want to talk about this, but it may sound funny, but it is. Money is actually not real. It's actually energy. If I give you 1,000, what have I given you? I've not given you that paper, but I've given you the ability to purchase something that is worth. That's like an energy. No, it's not even like an energy. It's energy. I've given you the ability to purchase. For example, if I pull, let's say, a 500 shilling note here, or beer, or rand, or whatever the thing it is you guys use in your country, if I pull it and show you here, how can you justify that indeed that is 500? Okay, why is it even called a legal tender? What I've done is that I've just given you a representation of the capacity to purchase something worth 500. I've given you the energy to buy something that is worth 500. I've given you the capacity to do that. So if you view it as an energy, and you cannot create it nor you can destroy it, but you can transform it from one form to the other. You can transform that, and that's why you can use that cash to purchase a land, which is a real estate, a real investment, then come up with a structure out there, because you had the energy and the capacity to actually do that. Well, I know somehow that one may be a bit deeper, but one day I'm going to come here and preach that thing, because money is not real as you thought. It's actually energy. Anyway, this is good, Joseph. Stay put. Make sure that you stay put. Make sure that you subscribe, like the video, and see you the next one.